Well, hello, everyone. My name is Elena G. Levine, and I'm president of Quantum Success Solutions and author of the book Networking for Nerds. And I'm a STEM career consultant and professional speaker, and I am really, really enthusiastic about our webinar topic today, and I'd like to welcome you all to this. Our topic today, very exciting, super timely, great time to do this, is all about timing the job search in the US and when to apply for your green card and when to file for your green card and when to apply for jobs. And I'm very excited to welcome my colleague and my friend Brian Getson, Esquire. He is one of the top immigration lawyers here in the US. He's also the founder of researchergreencard.com. Welcome, Brian. I think we're going to have a great time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Elena. This is a really important topic for individuals that are thinking about filing for green cards in terms of when to file. And I always get questions about this, so I thought it would be great to have a webinar on it.
And it's interesting because I want to tell the audience this, that as Brian and I were planning this and working out the timing of this webinar and how to organize and optimize our time during this webinar, there were actually a lot of questions that I had as a STEM career consultant that Brian was able to provide some clarity on. And that's why I'm especially excited about this topic, because it is invaluable for scientists and engineers and other scholars who are interested in working in the United States to know exactly when to apply for that green card, when to file for the green card, and to start the planning at the right time. And this is going to be a very interesting thing that we're going to be talking about. Now, speaking of timing, one of the things that I'm also very excited about is that, first of all, we are recording this webinar, and you will be able to access this webinar on researchergreencard.com, where you'll also find a companion webinar that Brian and I did a few months ago, all about networking and career planning and also issues associated with the green card. So I really highly encourage you to take a look at that website that Brian founded as part of his firm, researchergreencard.com, because there's a lot of invaluable resources there. And for those of you who are joining us today, if you would like to tweet or post on LinkedIn or Facebook anything that we talk about, you are welcome to quote anything that I say. You hashtag it Networking for Nerds and hashtag Researcher Green Card. You will actually be entered into a drawing to win a copy of my book, Networking for Nerds. We're going to be giving out a copy. Thank you, Brian, and thank you to his firm, Getson & Schatz, and researchergreencard.com. We're going to be giving out a copy of Networking for Nerds. So the more you tweet, the more you post with those hashtags, the more opportunity you get to win. So I hope you will take advantage of that. And of course, if you have any questions, we're going to be answering your questions today. So make sure you type them into the question panel in your webinar console, because we will be able to help you with those questions today. So what are we going to be doing for this webinar? I want to talk to you about an overview of timing issues associated with career planning, job searching, and applying for that green card. And we also are going to discuss specific timeline strategies and time management strategies to really optimize your time, customizing it to your specific needs as a scholar, as a researcher who is looking for a job in the United States and is looking to file their green card for the United States. And then Brian and I are going to also address exactly when you do apply for that green card in the job search process and answer your questions. And Brian, speaking of questions, am I right or am I right? You offer free consultations, right?
That's right, Elena. So again, my specialty is helping scientific researchers obtain green cards in the EB-1A, Extraordinary Ability, EB-1B, Outstanding Professors and Researchers, and National Interest Waiver categories. And we offer free consultations year-round, either by Skype or telephone, or if you happen to be in the Philadelphia area, we can have an in-person consultation in my office. But immigration is federal law, so we represent people all over the United States, and most of our clients, we're communicating with them by Skype and telephone and email. So, it's always a good idea for me to look at somebody's specific credentials and their personal situation, because everybody's case is unique. So, certainly everyone can feel free to go on our website, and there's an online scheduler where you can just schedule the consultation, right through the website, or you could certainly call or email to schedule as well.
And, I want to share with our audience today something interesting. I, as the audience may know, I am a certified conference junkie. I mean, I have a problem. I like to go to a lot of conferences, particularly STEM-based, and I work with a lot of STEM organizations, and I speak at a lot of STEM conferences. And, the reason Brian and I are colleagues and confederates in this fight to help scholars achieve their dreams is because we are speaking at the same conferences. I keep seeing Brian and his amazing team at the same conferences and working with the same professional STEM societies that I am active with as well. And, that's the thing about Brian and his team. And Brian, this is not just your profession, but this is your passion, right? You've been doing this for a long time.
Absolutely, Elena. I, started doing this in 1995, and I've been doing it ever since. And, I'm really interested in the type of work that, the researchers are doing to benefit the world in terms of healthcare and the environment and materials. And, and I feel as, when I help get somebody a green card, I'm in my own way helping to advance the world through their work. So this work is really meaningful to me, and I really care about each and every case, the preparation that goes into it.
Yeah, Brian, you get it. Getson gets it. So speaking of gets it, let's get on with this webinar and let's stick to the time because I want to make sure we get you, the audience, out on time to your next engagement. So let's talk about timing. So we have to time our timing right when it comes to planning our career, when it comes to searching for a job, when it comes to filing for that green card. And I think that timing is actually the most important element in the equation for landing a job in the United States. You do want to plan early. You do want to start looking early and start planning your planning early for the job. And even if you start a little bit late, if you have a plan where you want, and we're going to talk about this, if you want to get a job by May, for example, let's say that's when you're going to conclude your graduate studies or your postdoc, or that's when you're having a life change, so you want to have that in mind. Even if you're starting now as opposed to a few months from now, that's okay. But one of the things that I just recently found out, and Brian, I want you to help me clarify this for the audience, is there is a too early time frame for the green card, right? There is a time when we should not apply for the green card. Could you sort of explain that business about planning versus starting relating to the green card?
Absolutely, Elena. So what I mean by filing for the green card too early is if you're not qualified for the green card, then you shouldn't be filing for it. Because if you wind up filing and your case is denied by the immigration because your credentials are not ready yet for the green card standard, then it's going to be much more difficult for you. It's harder to get a petition approved the second time if you're denied the first time, and you would be better off waiting until your credentials grow until, to file. So the number one thing that the Immigration Service looks at when deciding a green card petition is level of citation. And, our firm offers a money-back guarantee to certain clients when we do the green card process. In other words, if we file the petition on your behalf and it's not approved, we'll refund your money. And, we generally look at citation level in terms of whether or not to give that money back guarantee, because that's what immigration cares about the most. So, a common question I get is how many citations are enough? For an NIW petition, we like to see between 75 and 100 or higher to offer the money back guarantee. For the EB1A petition, we like to see 300 or higher, and EB1B is somewhere in between. So, that being said, we have had cases approved with, all different types of citation levels. But, if your citation level is not high, then you're too early to file for the green card in all likelihood, unless there's some other circumstances that would warrant filing. Also, if your publication level is not high and growing, if you have not, done peer review, but may be able to do so in the future. So, starting the green card, you could be too early if you're not qualified. Also, you could be too early in your career. We generally do not like to start a green card process before somebody has graduated their PhD. the Immigration Service, especially under the Trump administration, they like to see what you're going to be doing, what job you're going to have before you start to file for the green card. So, we recommend at a minimum graduating your PhD and having a job before you file for the green card. So we talk about planning versus starting. Starting, there might be a case to wait. However, it is never too early to plan, Elena. And what we mean by plan is there's certain things that you can control as, a researcher to further your green card petition. You can do peer review in your own name, not through your supervisor. You can see if your university or if you work for a company is willing to do a press release on any of your work to see if you can get media articles where other people are talking about your work. You can try and publish and present as much as possible. You can try and apply for awards or memberships that require achievement. Those are the things that you can control. You can start networking to find people to write reference letters on your behalf in support of the green card petition. So planning is never too early. The things you can control, absolutely plan for them. And sometimes things you would help a green card petition, like doing peer review, that you might not otherwise do in your career, but you should be doing to help a green card. But starting, you have to balance your credentials versus your non-immigrant status, your immigration status in the US, when will it expire, versus the type of job you have. So, we're balancing planning versus starting in the big picture of, how to decide the timing.
Brian, I have a follow-up question about the issue of applying once you finish your graduate studies. So if I was a physicist, I would want to finish my PhD in physics before I start the application, correct?
Yes. I mean, there was a time, Elena, where we would apply for a green card before someone graduated their PhD, but we're just not doing that anymore based upon, just the feel that we have in terms of how the Immigration Service is deciding cases. And generally speaking, it's not really going to change your life all that much if you wait until you graduate your PhD before applying for the green card. And because you're going to wind up having work authorization without the green card, in nearly every single case. And especially if you want to apply for the EB1A criteria, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you're in that category. You're trying to show you're among the small percentage of researchers at the very top of the field in the entire world. So if you have just graduated from your PhD and you're comparing yourself to every researcher in the field at any career stage, immigration is going to question how such a young, recent person is at the top of the field. It's certainly possible to get approval based on somebody's particular circumstances, but if you're going to apply an EB1A, the further you get away from your PhD and the higher your citation level, the higher your chances.
What about for fields where a master's degree tends to be considered either a high degree or sometimes even the highest degree, or certainly a metric of success, i.e. the engineering field? So if I get a master's, if I'm in graduate school for electrical engineering and I get my master's, is this issue related to the topic that we're talking about, or is it another bag of issues?
So it's related. Just in terms of, but that's going to be your highest level of education. Then you need to think about, can you qualify to self-file for a green card, which is what we're talking about, is, self-filing based on your own credentials. The normal way foreign nationals file for a green card is having to go through what's called the PERM process, which is to show a lack of U.S. worker availability for the job. And that requires an employer sponsoring you and advertising for U.S. workers. So it's always a good thing for the foreign national if they can avoid this PERM process. If they're filing in an EB1A category or an NIW, they're controlling the green card. And they have a lot of job flexibility in that situation, and they don't need to worry about U.S. workers. And same thing with EB1B, you don't need to worry about U.S. workers. If you're at the master's level, then you might not have the qualifications that somebody at the PhD level has to self-file, but it's certainly possible. We have a number of cases that we file for people only with master's level degrees that we get approved in these categories. But again, it's going to be more likely that you're going to need this labor certification if you only have a master's degree.
Good to know. A lot of very interesting elements to this process, a lot of details that people need to be thinking about. And speaking of details, you know, Brian, we're talking about a lot of different topics and words and phrases here. I was wondering if you could sort of walk us through the pertinent words and vocabulary here so we all know what we're talking about.
Sure. So there's 3 ways to apply for a green card without going through the perm process and without worrying about U.S. workers. The first is a national interest waiver petition. And this is what's called the EB2 second preference. And what I mean by preferences is the government of the United States issues a certain amount of employment-based immigration green cards each year. And they are broken down into categories, which we call EB1, EB2, and EB3. And there's something called the visa bulletin that if you would Google those words, visa bulletin, that tells you what the dates are for the different categories that somebody with an approved petition can file for a green card. So getting a green card, there's 2 steps involved. There's the I-140 step, and that is the petitions that you see on the screen right now. And then there's the I-485, which is the green card application step. And, you know, depending on what country you're from and your circumstances, sometimes you only file the I-140 petition first and then file the I-485 green card later. And sometimes you file them both together. So national interest waiver is in the EB2 category. And this is mainly used by people who are not from India or China because there is no wait for them to file for the green card in this category. For China, there's a 3.5-year wait, and for India, there's a 9.5-year wait. So people from China or India, they want to try and get into the EB1 categories because there's less of a wait. But even people from China or India, there is sometimes a place for a national interest waiver petition. And extraordinary ability, the legal standard for national interest waiver is number 1, that your work is of substantial merit and national importance. And for everybody listening, you know, that's going to be healthcare, the environment, the economy. So all of your work is going to be in the national interest. Number 2, you have to be well positioned to advance your endeavor. And, you know, that's where we talk about actually having a job so you can show immigration that you're well positioned. And number 3 is that on balance, based upon what you have already accomplished in the field, there's no need to worry about U.S. workers. So that is national interest waiver. Extraordinary ability alien means you're among the small percentage of researchers at the very top of the field in the world. And this is the most difficult category to win because you have to show you're among the top in your field in the world. And there's a list of 10 categories, and you have to meet at least 3 of them. And the 3 most common categories are original scientific contributions of major significance, which is primarily based on citation level, publications, and peer review. And those are the 3 most common. Then you could also have the media discussion, awards, memberships, and playing a critical role for an organization or a leading role. And, you know, EB1A, there is a wait time for China and India of about 2.5 years until you can file for the green card. And for the rest of the world, there is also a wait time of a little more than a year. So there were times in the past where clients not from China or India would sometimes file in the EB1A category because they could get their green card faster, but that is not the case anymore. So anybody listening who is not from China or India, you should not even be considering in EB1A. You should only be thinking about NIW because you're not going to have to wait for your green card, and it's an easier category. And then EB1B is outstanding professors and researchers. This requires being sponsored by a university for a permanent research position or tenured track or tenured teaching position. And a permanent research position means a level above a postdoc. And then you have to have at least 3 years of research or teaching experience in the field. And that you can only use your PhD research if it's considered as outstanding towards that 3 years. And then you have to show international recognition as outstanding, which is meeting 2 categories instead of 3 of the list. And, a new strategy, Elena, that I have been recommending for people from China and India that are borderline in the EB1A category is to file a national interest waiver petition first and establish a date, and then allow your credentials to grow. And then, when your citation level's higher, when you have more peer review, whatever it may be, then file the EB1A petition down the line. So you're allowed to use the date of the national interest waiver filing for the extraordinary ability petition that you file later on. So this really ties in with the timing theme of the webinar, where, for example, if you're from China or India and you would file an NIW petition, let's say in March of 2019, and then if that petition got approved, then maybe you file your EB1A petition, and maybe you file that in December of 2020. And now you've allowed, almost 2 years to go by to allow your credentials to grow. And then if your EB1A petition gets approved, you'll hopefully be able to immediately file for the green card without waiting, because you can use the March 2019 date from your NIW petition. So you're not going to get the green card any slower than if you had filed the EB1A petition in March 2019, but now you've allowed yourself all that extra time to allow your credentials to grow. So again, this is a new strategy that we've come up with at our firm to deal with some of the backlogs for China and India. So that's the green card aspect of it. And then the temporary non-immigrant visas is what everyone who's in the US right now without a green card would be in. You're either here as an F1 student, and once you graduate, you get 3 years of work authorization called OPT-EAD, or you're here in H1B, or you're here in J1 working for a university, and you may or may not be subject to what's called the 2-year home residency requirement, or the O1A is the non-immigrant version of EB1A, and that becomes a useful strategy for people that are working in industry, don't win the H1B lottery, or who run out of time of their 6 years of H1B. So that's something that can be used, and that would be for anyone in the world. So that's sort of a summary of the terms that we're talking about.
It's so interesting how timing really does play such an important role in the entire process. The timing of it right, when to do it, how to do it, how much time to allot. We're going to talk about some of these issues. We already got a bunch of questions, Brian, and one of them I think is actually relevant to our conversation point at this moment in time. I'd like to ask you, this comes in from somebody. She asks, can you hold a J1 visa and work as a J1 even after you have an NIW approved?
So the answer is yes. If you have an NIW approved, that will not prevent you from extending your DS 2019 form and continuing to work in J1. Once you file the I-485 green card application, then you can no longer extend your DS 2019. So you need to make sure that you're going to be able to get an EAD work authorization through the I-485 application before your DS 2019 expires, so that you're not going to have a lapse in work authorization. So that certainly fits in with the theme of timing. One of the elements of timing you have to think about is making sure that you have work authorization at all times without a lapse. So if you're filing a 485 and you're in a temporary status like J1 that you can't extend, unlike the H1B that you can extend, you really need to make sure that you're going to time the green card application right so there's no lapse in work authorization. And if you think you might not get the EAD in time, then you should extend your DS 2019 first and then file the 45 green card application. And timing also comes into play with travel. You know, there's something called a 90-day rule, where if you're in a temporary non-immigrant status that's not what's called dual intent, like J1 or F1, you want to make sure not to file anything within 90 days of your entry. And we are normally recommending someone in J1 or F1 who files just an I-140 to not travel at all after that is filed.
Good point. Very, very good point, particularly right now. We're getting a lot more questions. I'm going to ask you one more at this point, and then I'm going to hold off and ask you some others in a little bit. But one person asked about concurrent filing. So he was concurrently filing an I-140 and an I-485, and he wanted to know if the concurrent filing of the I-140 and I-485, does it slow down the processing time for the I-140? Because he hasn't been approved for his I-140 in a year after he applied a year ago.
The answer to the question is no. The concurrent filing does not slow down the process of the I-140. But a year is too long to have not heard. So I would recommend that the individual make what's called a service request with the immigration service. So they would call the immigration 1-800 number, which is 1-800-527-2983, and they would ask about the delay in the processing of the I-140.
Excellent. And you know, that brings up another question. I didn't even think of this until this moment, but if you can talk, and maybe you want to wait until a little bit later, about how much time, if I'm applying for my green card, if I'm doing any of the things that we see on the screen right now, how much time should I allow before I actually follow up and do that request to find out where my paperwork is? Is that something you want to answer now, Brian, or do you want to hold off?
Fine. So immigration publishes their processing times on their website at uscis.gov, and it will tell you what date they're processing cases. So if somebody is behind the date on the website, then they can follow up with immigration.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Brian. So I want to talk a little bit about time management in the career planning phase and also in the job searching phase. And, you know, one of the things that I hear a lot from the people that I interact with, my consulting clients for STEM careers, and when I'm speaking, is how do I manage my time both in terms of actually getting a job and building a career and planning a career, and then once I'm actually in my job. And also the additional issue is how do I plan, how do I do my time management effectively and optimize it appropriately for me while I'm working to get everything done. So the way I look at this, and I really think that you, the audience, as scientists and engineers, you actually have an advantage that other people don't have. Because you're in STEM, you already know how to use the scientific method. You already know how to do experiments and analyze data and understand how to mine that data for information that can help you make a decision and understand what you've discovered or what you've innovated and the significance of what you've done. And that is actually the skill set that is required to be effective in your time management for job searching and career planning. And so the way I look at it is, you as a scientist, as an engineer, the way you can manage your time is to become a data scientist and a process engineer. So what do I mean by that? The data scientist, everything that you do in building a career and landing a job and even applying for and getting that green card is all about data science. It's about collecting data. It's about understanding the data from yourself. What is important to you? What are your needs and wants in terms of a career, in terms of a job? What are the skills that you can effectively communicate to potential employers? What is your value, or what is your brand, which is your promise of value to potential employers? That's data collection, data that you're collecting from your own mind. I almost look at it as intrinsic and extrinsic data collection decision that you need to do if you're going to build a career. And the intrinsic data collection is data that you start thinking about in terms of your own self and the value that you can provide decision makers and innovators within your field. So that is your skills that you have, that is the problems that you can and have solved in the past and will solve in the future. That's your talents, those are your credentials, your experience, your knowledge, all those things you need to download out of your brain to be able to see on paper to understand what it is that you could do for a potential decision maker, potential employer, or potential customer or client. And then the extrinsic data collection is what is it that you could do for a career, and where are those ecosystems that would help you to thrive? Where are those organizations where you would be a success, where you would be able to have the most impact for your own personal enjoyment and flow? And so that type of data collection is extrinsic because it's involved with, you do this when you're networking, when you are building win-win alliances with other parties where you're both providing value. And when you're doing that type of networking, what you actually find is you get access to hidden opportunities, and to be able to understand what those hidden opportunities are, what those potential jobs could be, even opportunities that you might create yourself or have created for you in the flick of an eye, because you suddenly communicated that you know how to do X or that you have a skill in Y and Z. Those types of opportunities, it takes somebody who understands the significance of data, the extrinsic data and the intrinsic data, to be able to understand how they can move on that. So you have to be able to see the data that you're collecting from yourself and from outside yourself about where you could potentially work, and be able to mine that data effectively so that you can see where you would be appropriate, where the most appropriate place would be for you, for your career. And then as far as a process engineer is concerned, the way I think about this is you have to build systems, processes within your day-to-day, week-to-week, even year-to-year life and work environment, and within your own system in terms of working and solving tasks and solving problems. You have to build these systems that make sense for you, particularly if you are trying to optimize your time. If you're going to manage your time effectively to get your job, to get your green card, and to do everything that you need to do, you're going to have a time management system that works for you. But the system that you use for yourself is not necessarily going to be the system that I use for myself. So that's where the data science, knowing what it is that you do and how you do it and where you're most productive and when you're most productive, helps you, and also building different processes into your day-to-day life that will actually help you to be the most productive. I want to give you an example. So, for me, I am a very visual person. I like to make a lot of lists. I like to have I often have lists of lists. I have a master list of things that I want to do over the course of the next few weeks. And then I have weekly lists, and I even have a day list. And then on my day list, and I actually write this out on paper. I'm sorry, trees, I apologize, but I am using paper. I write these lists out. And then what I also like to do, and I found that this helps me to be my most productive, is I have built for myself an hour-to-hour schedule. So almost every day, and admittedly it's not every day, but almost every day when I get up in the morning or sometimes in the evening before I go to sleep, I actually plan out my schedule hour by hour, not minute by minute, because that's too tight for me, for Elena. But for me to do it hour by hour, to know, okay, from 8 to 9, I'm going to work on this webinar. And from 9 to 10, I'm going to write this blog. And from 10 to 11, I'm going to do my emails. And from 11 to 12, I'm going to do X. This actually helps me to be very productive. I experimented with this, and I found that this is the most effective method for me. So this process works for me. Now, when you're building a process for yourself, for time management and for career planning and job searching, what's very important to recognize is to identify when you are most productive in the day or even in the week. And you really need to guard this time. And there's a wonderful article that I believe appeared in Science Magazine called The 1 Hour Work Week, which is about a professor who realized that he is most productive, I think, at a certain period of time in the day. I think it was in the early morning. So let's say from 6 to 9 a.m. every day, he is his most productive. So he never schedules an appointment during that time, or a meeting, or a call on the phone, or even puts in his schedule to do another task during that time. Instead, he uses that time to do what he needs to get done for the day, for the week, for the month. So that's when he actually writes his papers, is from 6 to 9 a.m. every day, and he guards that with his life. And so what a part of being a process engineer and a data scientist in terms of career planning is that you have to recognize, when are you your most productive? Are you most productive early in the morning? If so, make sure that from 7 to 9 a.m. you are doing nothing but the biggest, most important task of the day. Or is it maybe in the afternoon? You know, I know a lot of science writers. I'm a science writer myself. I know a lot of science writers who actually do their best work late at night. And so they do a lot of work during the day, but they are actually writing. So they're producing the meat, or for those of you who are vegetarians like myself, the tofu of their enterprise. They are producing that in the evenings, let's say from 6 to 10 p.m. every single night. That's when they do their work. That's when they write their articles. And so you need to identify for yourself when you are your most productive. Guard this time. And related to this, you also have to identify when you're your most productive for career planning and job searching. So this could mean that you are very productive in terms of career planning, that you really have your mind focused. You are really thinking clearly and optimizing your time. Maybe it's during your lunchtime when you don't have to worry about other things. Maybe, and also you have to think about where you are your most productive. You know, are you your most productive in the office when you have other things that might be stimulating you and interrupting you, or maybe at home? Or maybe home is not the right place. Maybe you need to go to a coffee shop or go to the library maybe once a day to go work on this career planning process. But the idea is figure out when you're most productive for the career planning and then guard that time carefully. You also need to understand, in terms of time management, how are you most productive for career planning? Does it involve blocks of time, like the beginning or the end of the day, or your lunchtime every day at lunch, when I take lunch from 12 to 1, or whenever I take lunch? If that time changes from day to day, I can work for that hour on my job search process, on thinking about my green card, on thinking about planning for my career. Or do you do better with short bursts, like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes later in the day, 15 minutes before you go to sleep? And maybe it ends up that you spend a full 2 hours a day working on your career planning, but it's scattered, it's pieces over the course of the day. This is very important for you to be aware. So you need to be honest and clear about what occupies your time. Obviously, there's going to be work, and there's going to be career planning and job searching and thinking about the green card. But there are other things that occupy your time. There's your family. There's your pets if you have them. Plants, maybe. I, of course, don't have any plants because I will kill plants if I have them in my house, not because I want to. I just forget that they're there. So plants are not part of my family, but certainly family is a part of my time. And exercise might take up your time, hobbies, community activities. Be honest and clear for yourself. That's part of that data collection of what occupies your time, so that you can be honest about building a time management system that works for you. And then once you've identified how you are most productive, when you are most productive, where you are most productive, now we're going to think about what our major goal is and what we have to do to achieve that goal, to get where we want to get. So if our goal is to get a job, let's say by the time I finish my postdoc in May of 2019, then I need to think about and list out what are the actual tasks that I need to do over the course of the next 8 months to actually meet that goal, right? And so some of those overarching tasks will be to network, right? Because you want to build those win-win alliances to create collaborations, to create opportunities for you to get that job. You need to research where the organizations are, what universities and departments you might want to work for, what organizations, what departments are actually going to be opening faculty positions and other types of jobs. And you need to be able to plan when you'll apply, right? Especially if we're thinking about a academic job search. You know, people are applying for jobs right now for the following year, because that's the cycle. So you need to be aware of that as well. And then you're going to set for yourself a reasonable, customized schedule for yourself with deadlines, timelines, and actual deliverables. So I'm going to say each month I'm going to do X. I'm going to reach out to 10 people to set up cold emails, to set up appointments for informal conversations or informational interviews. I'm going to research 10 different organizations, universities, departments, and companies. I'm going to, look at the speaking, who is speaking at conferences that are near me or that I could potentially attend. I'm going to look at what are the deadlines to apply for the positions that I want and for the other opportunities. And I'm going to set up timelines and set up actual deliverables, because you need to be able to measure whether or not you are actually making achieving what you are saying you are achieving. And the only way you can measure that is to have specific deliverables that you will meet. And if you're not meeting them, guess what? You're a scientist, you're an engineer, you are a superstar, so you will be flexible and you'll adjust your schedule. That's part of the data collection, and that's part of the process engineering too. If this process isn't working for you, adjust. Be dynamic in your focus. Change it up a little bit. And maybe this month you need a little extra time at work to do X, so you need to give yourself a break on the career planning stuff because you need to work on those other things too. So a lot of time management and being effective in your time management is really about understanding the dynamics of the system and how the system can change quickly, and giving yourself a break, adjusting as you need to. Now, Brian, we're talking about job search timing issues, but I'd like to learn a little bit more about the issue of what happens if I'm applying for a job and looking for a job, if I'm in the U.S. already versus being outside the U.S. at this moment. Could you elucidate this issue for us?
Sure, Elena. So when you are career planning, you always have to think about your next step in terms of maintaining your immigration status. So where are you right now, and then where are you going? So before you graduate, if you're studying for your PhD in the United States, then you're going to need to think about what job are you going to get for your OPT. Are you going to take an industry job, or are you going to take a postdoc job? And you need to make sure that you have a job lined up in time for after you graduate, because you're only allowed up to 90 days unemployment in your first 12 months of OPT. So then once you're in OPT, you have to think about where are you going to go when your OPT ends. So again, you have 12 months of OPT initially, and then you have a 24-month STEM extension. So you have to plan ahead for what are you going to do when your OPT ends. And there's really, a limited number of options for you. So if you're in a university setting, you're at a postdoc, then you can be sponsored for a J1 or an H1B in what's called the CAP exempt setting. And again, if you're in a university setting, there's no issues with regard to timing after your OPT ends. You can start your J1 or your CAP exempt H1B without worrying about getting that, because there's no limitations on timing. If you are in industry, then your only options for working after your OPT are winning the H1B lottery or an O1A petition. And you might not win the H1B lottery. The lottery is filed every April to start the first 5 business days of April to start work in October. And you need to apply for the lottery every year, even if it means cutting your OPT short. And if you don't win the H-1B lottery, you need a plan. You need a plan to either get O-1A if you're qualified. And if you're not qualified, then the only way for you to maintain your non-immigrant status in the United States is to apply for H-1B or J-1 or a green card. And you could also apply for a green card if you were in a postdoc situation. But again, that's only if you're not from India or China. If you are from India or China, because of the backlogs right now in EB1 and NIW, you're not going to have time to apply for the green card during your OPT. So you want to have a roadmap in terms of your career and your non-immigrant status at all times when you're in the United States. If you're outside the United States and you want to come to the US, then we usually recommend that you try and come to the U.S. first in one of these temporary non-immigrant statuses, and then apply for the green card once you're here. If you're going to work in a university postdoc situation, then you should have no problem getting an H-1B or a J-1. And in general, H-1B is much better for you than J-1, whether you're in the US or outside, because again, H-1B is a dual intent visa, meaning you can apply for the green card and extend your H-1. And there's no 2-year home residency requirement with a J-1, where if you are subject to that 2-year requirement, you have to waive it before you can get an H-1B or a green card. If you're filing for a green card from outside the US, that's possible. You know, again, we like to have a job offer. We like to tell immigration, if you give me the green card, I intend to go work for ABC company or this university. And it's very nice to have a letter to that effect stating that they would consider hiring you if you had a green card. But the processing for a green card takes well more than a year if you're overseas. So again, if you're overseas, do everything you can to try and get to the US first to begin working.
What about, I wanted to ask you some questions. These were questions that came up. I want the audience to know, again, these were questions that came up for me thinking about how I can better provide value to my STEM career consulting clients by better understanding the green card issue. So I want to ask you, Brian, if you can sort of walk us through some of these timing issues. Job search timing issues without a green card. So when can and when should I actually start applying for jobs?
So, you know, if you're in OPT, if you haven't graduated yet and are looking for the OPT job, I would certainly start applying for OPT jobs 6 months to a year early. If you're outside the US, you know, and you think you want to come to the US, start applying. And, you know, whenever if you're in an OPT status and might need to find a new job, apply early. So, you know, in terms of applying for jobs, it can never be too early. You know, you have to time when you would be ready to make the transition and then start looking for jobs accordingly. But, you know, it's always good to leave more time than you need to apply for jobs. So, you know, how much time should you allow for the job search and the application process? You have to factor in the expiration of your non-immigrant status. You need to make sure, for example, that if your OPT is expiring on, you know, March 31st, 2019, that you have applied for jobs sufficiently in advance that you're going to be able to have a new job to go into a different status. So you need to balance how long is it going to take for you to find a job in the normal industry course versus, you know, running into that end date of your current status. And then, you know, how much time should you allot to the green card process? Normally, when we prepare a case, it takes about 4 months to prepare the case from start to finish. That's the amount of time that we would typically need to file. We could do it sooner if we had to, but, you know, the more time you allow, the better. I would much rather prepare the most thorough case I can possibly prepare without worrying about timing. So, you know, the earlier you can start the green card process, once you're qualified, the better. And working in industry or a university academic, you know, nonprofit government setting makes a difference. And the reason is, if you take a job in industry, you're likely going to stop publishing. Whereas if you're in a university or other type of nonprofit setting, you're likely going to keep publishing and grow your credentials. So if you're in industry and you stop publishing, we generally recommend that people file their green card sooner rather than later. Because if you wait too long, your credentials, your publications are going to look old and stale. So, you know, we kind of move up the recommendation for filing for a green card for somebody who takes a job in industry.
Brian, you kind of hinted at this earlier, but I wanted to ask you this question. You know, if there are people who want to work with you, when do you want to start? When do you want to hear from a potential client? When do you want to start working?
As soon as they think that they want to file for a green card to live permanently in the U.S., I want to hear from them, because then we can start talking about managing all of this. We can start talking about managing the timing and the status. We can start talking about doing things that, you know, can help you build your credentials towards a green card filing. Even if you haven't graduated yet from PhD, I want to hear from you. If you're not graduating till 2021, I'll talk to you right now about everything that you can do to build your case, and I'll put a note in my electronic calendar to follow up with you in 2021. Maybe you're going to contact me right now and I'm going to say, hey, you're ready to file. Let's get started right now. So I would love to hear from everybody just for a free evaluation of their credentials.
That's great to know. So also, when you're timing your green card application, there's a couple of things that you do need to consider. Can you walk us through some of these things?
Sure. So again, if you're from China or India, you're waiting in the EB1 category. So, you know, for example, if your OPT is expiring, having an approved immigrant petition is not going to help you stay in the U.S. to work. Likewise, if your J1 is expiring, you're going to probably need to look to transition to H1B. You might need to look to transition to O1. So the wait has really changed the planning for people from China or India. If you're not from China or India, I don't want you thinking about the EB1 category. There were times in the past where I would have done this for people not from China or India, but no longer. Please, please, please listen to the professional advice and only consider an NIW category if you're not from China or India. Then again, what's the expiration date of your status? You know, you have to make sure that you're having work authorization and status at all times. And if you can't get a green card or a work authorization before your current immigration status expires, you need to find a way to extend it. And, you know, so we're balancing what's the timing of when you can file for the green card, what's your non-immigrant status.
It's so interesting. It almost seems like you might need a degree in complex systems to actually understand this, but at the same time, when you are clarifying it for us, it makes sense. Like I can see how, like where in my calendar I should start thinking about these things and putting them in my calendar to start planning for it, even if it is a few years away. But
Sure.
Brian, other things to think about too, right? What else should I be thinking about?
You can really simplify it, Elena. You break it down to there's really two issues to consider with the timing when you boil it down. Number one is your current immigration status, okay? So, you know, when does your current status expire? And we talked about how if you're in a postdoc situation, it's easier for you because you have this cap exempt H1B, you have the ability to have J1 status, and you're continuing to grow your credentials. If you're in an industry setting, then you have to worry about the H1B cap, you have to maybe go to O1A, and you have to consider that you're not going to publish anymore, so you need to maybe speed up the timing. But I always tell people, do what you want to do in your career and let the green card follow. You know, my job as a lawyer is to make it work for you, to do everything I can to get you a green card based upon the career choice that you want. So don't let the green card dictate your career. Then the other flip side of this is your credentials. So are you qualified or not qualified at the present time to meet the legal standard for EB1A, EB1B, or NIW? So if you're not qualified, then the recommendation is for you to wait until you are qualified. So you're balancing your immigration status and whether you're working in industry or academic versus your credentials. And sometimes the spouse will dictate things because sometimes the spouse needs a work authorization, or you're living in different cities because of your jobs and you don't want that anymore. So sometimes we will maybe do things a little differently because of the spouse situation. But the bottom line is what's most important is being qualified, Elena. That supersedes everything else. If you're qualified for the green card, then it's time to file. And if you're not, then you should wait and do things to build your credentials. And then during this qualification period, manage your immigration status.
That's a very simple way of looking at it, Brian. Thank you for clarifying for that for us. So the other thing I was thinking about when we were putting this webinar together was an issue that comes up a lot when we talk about negotiation and salary issues and even the two-body challenge or the two-body problem in terms of interviewing. So, of course, the audience is probably familiar with the two-body problem, particularly in academia and in STEM, where you are you do have a partner or a spouse who is usually highly educated, just like yourself, and you're looking for jobs in the same region, hopefully even in the same city, so you can live in the same house, which a lot of couples would prefer not to, but some couples actually like each other and they want to live together. And so a lot of my clients will often ask me, Elena, I'd like to find out when in the interviewing process, like let's say I'm applying for a faculty job, when in the interviewing process should I actually mention that my spouse or my partner would also like a job at the same institution? And while we were preparing for this webinar, I was thinking that the same type of systems of questions that we would ask for the two-body challenge also comes up for the green card. And you might have already clarified this, but I just want to give one more check next to this issue for the audience about what are the pros and cons and factors of applying for the green card before you apply for jobs, while you're applying for jobs, during the negotiation phase, even after the job has been accepted. Are these all, have you already sort of put this all under one umbrella, or are there factors we need to consider?
So I think, Elena, again, I want you to have a job before applying for the green card, for sure. Okay, so it's best to tell the Immigration Service that you are working in this job, and if you give me the green card, I'm going to continue working in this job, or if I change jobs, I'm going to still work in the same field that I have defined in my petition. So how you define your field is important. You want to define it in a way that it covers everything you've done in the past plus any job you may take in the future. But when you're negotiating and applying for the job, you want to be completely upfront at the beginning about your immigration status. If you're working for an industrial company, are they going to be willing to sponsor you for H-1B? If they're not, you probably don't want to take that job if you need H-1B sponsorship. Would a university, if you're an OPT, when your OPT ends, are they going to possibly put you into H-1B or J-1? You want to know these things as early as you can. Sometimes you have to take the job and then you figure out the immigration things later. But it's a good idea to have the conversation about immigration status, during the negotiation and the process. But I wouldn't actually apply for the green card until after you have the job.
Good tip. Thank you, Brian. Now, we did have a case study, but we have so many questions coming up. I'm wondering if maybe we want to skip this case study and just go to the questions. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, sure. So, just this case study would be that, if somebody's in OPT right now and they're ending in a year from now and they have 105 citations and 7 peer review and they're from Greece, this is a case where I would likely consider filing for the NIW petition right now while they're still in F1 OPT. So, again, it would just be using this as an example of timing. So based on the level of citation and the number of peer review, et cetera. So, but, that's just what this was about. And let's now definitely, Elena, let's try and get everybody's questions answered.
Okay, excellent. So bottom line, everybody, we want to start early, start now in designing the planning process, put together a time management process and plan that works for you. Make it a priority actually in your life to build a time management system that works for you. And of course, recognize and know these strategic timing issues when it comes to landing the job and applying for your green card. And then reach out to those like Brian and I who can assist you with these efforts. I mean, Brian, you offer 3 very specific things that I want the audience to know about that I think they should know about in terms of the value that you provide.
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, there's very few lawyers in the country that specialize in this enough to offer a money-back guarantee for clients. And I will evaluate your case. And, in most cases, we do offer a money-back guarantee. We employ science writers who are, master's levels degrees in science to help write the letters. And, one thing that we do as a firm is we write the reference letters for our clients. And we also write the cover letter to immigration. And, I've been doing this a very long time, so I have a good sense in terms of what the Immigration Service, how they evaluate these types of cases.
Excellent. Okay, let's get to your questions. Okay, one question that came up, and I don't know that maybe this isn't necessarily relevant, but I do want to actually ask this question. Okay, the question is this: which visa type is recommended while going into a postdoc, an academic postdoc from a PhD? between a J1, H1B, or OPT? Does this depend on where they come from, Brian?
No, so you want to use your OPT in a postdoc. So you want to use your 3 years of OPT first. There's no reason to waste those 3 years of OPT. Between H1B and J1, far and away, H1B is better because of the dual intent nature and avoiding the 2-year home residency requirement. But a lot of universities don't want to sponsor you for H1B. They want to put you into J1 because they don't have to pay you as much as in H1B. And if you're going to have J1, that's better than no job at all. So we can still manage and work with J1. H1B is preferred, but J1 is certainly fine. But use your OPT first.
So another person asks, how hard is an O1A visa to get for a person who has already applied for an NIW and has a strong profile?
Sure. So if you have a strong profile, you would certainly have to evaluate the possibility of O1A. O1A is easier to get than EB1A because with O1A, you only need to meet the 3 categories. With EB1A, you need to meet the 3 categories. And then there's a second analysis called Kazarian, where they have to show that, you know, you're among the top of the field by a preponderance of the evidence. But if you have a high citation level and you have an approved NIW and you want to go to an industry job, absolutely you should consider the O1A.
Another person asked, if I apply for an NIW in my OPT period, can I get an OPT extension?
The answer is yes. If you only file the I-140 petition, then you can still get the OPT extension.
Okay.
But, you know, sometimes you might want to just wait a little bit to allow your credentials to grow to file in the 24-month stem instead of the 12 months. But if you do file in the 12 months with just the I-140, you can still get the EAD extension.
We're a little bit over time now, but we have such good questions. I want to just maybe take 3 more questions if we can to answer them because these are really good ones. So the first question is, what if so this person has applied, they have a service request from the USCIS. It came back with an answer of under active examination. That was the response they received. And they've received this response after 2 service requests. Is there a solution for this?
Sure. So the only solution, Elena, is what's called a writ of mandamus, and you would file that in federal court. And the writ of mandamus is to ask a judge to issue an order to force the Immigration Service to make a decision on the case. And usually just by filing that writ of mandamus, it gets the case decided because the lawyer for the government will contact the Immigration Service to get the case decided, and it never gets to the judge. So for really long-standing petitions and applications, the writ of mandamus is a very powerful tool.
Good to know. So another question came in. This will be the second to last one. This person writes, I am an Indian national, postdoc on an H-1B. My visa is for November 2017 through November 2019. And he wants to know if I file an EB-1A or an NIW in March of 2019, so before the visa runs out, will that interfere with my H-1B extension? Should the latter...
Yeah, the answer to that is no, Elena. That H-1B is a dual intent visa. So if you file an I-140 petition, you will still be allowed to extend the H-1B. And, you know, the strategy of the NIW and the EB-1A, whether to file them both or just the EB-1A, really would come back to the credentials, the citation level, the peer review, things like that.
Okay. And then here's the last question that was asked by a couple of people is costs. They want to know how much does it cost to apply for a green card or cost estimates for filing for the NIW or any of the others.
Sure. So you have to break the cost down between the I-140 portion and the I-45 portion. So for the I-140 portion, our attorney's fee is $5,000 total. And usually, you know, we will do both the EB-1A and the NIW for that amount if it warrants. And that $5,000, and there's $100 for costs, and we would have a payment plan for that of $2,350 initially, and then 4 monthly payments of $687.50 each. And then the filing fee for the I-140 petition to immigration is $700. EB-1A and EB-1B petitions can be premium processed for an extra $1,410, But since you have to wait anyway, if you're from India or China, 2.5 years, there's really no point in premium processing anymore. Immigration tends to be more difficult with premium processing. So, ever since the backlogs, we have not really premium processed cases for people from India or China, absent some extenuating circumstances. So that's the I-140 part. $5,100 for the attorney's fees and costs, and $700 filing fee per I-140 petition. For the I-45 green card part, there is a attorney's fee of $1,000 for the principal and $600 for each dependent. And then the filing fees are $1,225 for the green card for anybody 14 years and older, and $750 filing fee for the green card for anybody under 14. And the money back guarantee, that's normally on the $5,000 attorney's fee for the I-140 petition. But if you're not from China or India, and we recommend that you concurrently file the I-45 and an NIW I-140, I will offer the money back guarantee on the entire attorney's fee. The $5,000 attorney's fee for the NIW, plus the green card fee of $1,600 for the dependents.
Fantastic. Well, sadly, my dear audience, we are out of time. So I encourage you, for more information to better understand these issues, definitely go to Brian's website, researchergreencard.com, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's how I stay connected to my colleagues, to the amazing nerds and geeks who make this world a better place. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also post quotes and stories from this particular webinar on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Remember to hashtag it. Remember to use my handle at Elena G. Levine so I can enter you into the drawing to win a copy of my book, Networking for Nerds. I want to thank Brian Getson. Gets it. Thank you, Brian. This was amazing.
Thank you so much, Elena. It was a really excellent information for everybody.
And thank you to the amazing audience. And again, thank you, researchergreencard.com, for hosting this. And we'll be having more opportunities for you to learn from Brian and myself in the future. So definitely visit his website, researchergreencard.com. I won't wish you all good luck because you don't need it, but I will say enjoy your amazing career adventures because you're in for an amazing, wild time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks again.